everybody, I'm Judy Saul, also known as Tie-Dye Judy, and in this segment I am going to show you how I use a nylon rope to create a rope wrap shibori pattern. This is an example here of one that I've done recently. I don't know if you can see the pattern well, but what it is sort of a water-like pattern, and the way I apply the dye, I use lighter, medium, and dark colors, and it gives it a really nice texture and pattern. I tried using PVC pipe originally to do this pattern. I've got a book that demonstrates how to do this with the pipe. And the problem is the book was aiming towards using fabric or silk scarves, and they're flat and they don't have the shape that we have in garments. And what I found was, as I rolled the t-shirt or the garment over the pipe, a lot of the fabric got covered to the point where when I applied the dye, only part of the shirt got any absorption of the dye. So it wasn't coming out the way I wanted it to. And last year I actually went to the point of getting a large drainage pipe and had it cut into lengths that were a little shorter than the original size, and tried that, and again I was getting an overlap of the garment, so I had ghost patterns coming up. And the last thing I tried last year, which it worked better but it was still very awkward, was a 5-gallon bucket. And I would wrap the garment around the bucket, scrunch it down, tie it endlessly with sinew, and it just it came out okay, but it was a lot of trouble. So recently I got a book that was about fabric dye mixing, but at the end it had a couple of projects to try out, and one of them was using a rope to wrap. In this case they were demonstrating wrapping fabric, but I tried it with the garments and it works exactly the way I wanted it to. So I'm going to put this on pause for just a moment. I'm going to move the camera around and I'm going to show you how I do this. Okay, I think we're ready to go now. Here's my rope, and this is a approximately 4-foot length of nylon rope that I got at the local building supply store. And the gentleman was nice enough to melt the ends for me to keep them from unraveling, but I went ahead and wrapped them with duct tape also, just to keep them a little sturdier, because you know, when you use the rope and you're rinsing it and all of that, I just didn't want to end up with a lot of frayed ends to have to deal with. So the first thing I do, I've got a clean, dampened shirt that I've got on my work table, and I'm going to fold the sleeves in to the back because it makes it a little easier to deal with as I'm rolling the fabric over the rope. And then I'm going to center the rope over the side of the shirt, and I'm going to loosely roll the shirt over the rope. You don't want it real tight, otherwise you're not going to be able to scrunch it at the end, which is what you do to create the pattern. And I've got a couple of small rubber bands. All I'm going to do is use these at the ends and a couple in the middle to anchor the shirt so that it will hold its rolled shape as I scrunch it together and dye it. And I try and get the bands together so that they don't create any unwanted pattern. And I think I'll do one more just to hold this into place. And if you haven't figured it out yet, this is a real easy pattern. But it's one that, you know, I've mentioned this before. One of the reasons I like to do the video demos is I had a heck of a time when I started learning how to tie-dye, trying to follow written instructions and still photos in black and white in the few books that I could find on tie-dye. So I figured this is a little easier. When you see something done, it makes more sense. So now I have the shirt banded, rolled, and what I'm going to do is just scrunch it together towards the middle, and that creates a pattern that is going to act as a resist when I apply the dye. And it doesn't have to be real tight. I just, you know, want to get enough to where you see the folds that occur as a result of the scrunching. Now the next thing I do is I have a plastic storage bin. It is pretty good size. It says 9.4 US gallons. I don't know what the dimensions are, but it's long enough to where when I put this in, the shirt has plenty of room to lay flat, and I can put the leftover rope inside as well. And I also like to have my container on a slight angle because I'm going to be pouring dyes over the shirt, and I don't want the shirt to sit in a puddle because that's where you get the muddy colors. I want the dye to absorb into the shirt, but then excess dye can roll off and puddle at the other side, and then I'll just dispose of it later. So the first thing I need to do now is put my trusty rubber gloves on. If you've ever dyed without gloves, you know why you have to use them, because otherwise you're stuck with purple and green and red fingers, and it's just not anything that I need right now. So I have 3 colors mixed up here. I'm going to be using turquoise, bright green, and purple. And I'm just going to repeat what I did on this other shirt. As a matter of fact, I'm going to turn this backwards because what I will be doing is applying the lightest color first, and then I'll over dye with the medium color, and then over dye that with the darker color. And I'll be using about a cup and a half of dye to create this shirt. I could probably do with a little less, but you know, there's nothing worse than thinking you have enough dye on a garment and unrolling it and finding out that there's a lot that didn't get dyed. So I'd rather err on the side of caution here. So what I'm going to do is hold the end of the rope, and I'm at the bottom end of the shirt now. I'm going to use that for the lighter color. And I'm just going to start pouring very gently and sort of turn the shirt as I go so that I get dye coating all sides of it. And I'll go up about 1/3 of the way of the shirt with a little room for overlap with the green that's going to be coming next. Okay, I have clean water here in my bucket so I can rinse out my measurement cup. And if you've never dyed before, one of the things you will know is that you need to have dedicated utensils to use for your dyeing. You don't want to reuse these in your cooking. Okay. Half a cup of green. And I will start a little up on the blue to overlay so that I've got a combination of colors here. And, you know, by all means, if you have ideas about color and dye, this is not a hard and fast thing that I'm showing you as far as the color or the application of the dye even. It's just something that I like to do. I fell in love with this pattern because it reminded me of water, and so I tend to use colors that are conducive to give you that impression when you see the pattern. But I'm sure it would work just fine with any other color or colors that you would want to use. Now I used a little less than 1/2 cup of that green because it soaked in pretty good. So I'm leaving this a little bit loose right now. And I'm going to flip this around and pour from the top for the purple. And again, just gently pour it on, let it flow. The reason I dampen the shirt before I dye is because 2 things. It will take the folds better, and it also tends to help the dyes to wick more evenly. There are times when I've dyed a shirt dry and ended up with spots that didn't have any dye at all. And the last thing I'm going to do before I let this back for a while is just rinse my gloves off and just kind of squeeze a little bit to make sure that the dye is getting in to the innermost section that's closest to the rope. That way I will have absorption. And as you can see, I hope, because I've got this up on the jar lids, the excess dye has flown down to this corner, so I'm not going to get a lot of puddling. And all I'm going to do now is let this batch for about an hour, and then I apply my soda ash solution. In this case, I've used approximately 1.5 cups of dye, and so I will mix up 1 cup of hot water with about 2½ teaspoons of soda ash powder and dissolve that, let it sit, and then I'll apply that to the shirt just as I did with the dye. Let it sit for another hour, and then it's ready to rinse out and launder. So I hope you will give this a try. I recently put a poll on my blog space, which is hippiewear.blogspot.com, to give people several options of what patterns they would like to see a demo on, and this one won hands down. So I hope it helps anyone who wants to try this pattern. Again, this is how it should look when I get it rinsed out and laundered. And I hope you have fun with this. Let me know if you try it, and let me know how it turns out. Happy dyeing!